Good morning, everybody. We are going to get started with the second session in our Spring into SEL theme for the month. Just bear with me while I get the presentation up. So once again, my name is Mike Heater. I am the coordinator of curriculum, instruction, and ed tech here at CLIU 21. The title of today's session is going to be Refocus on the SEL Roadmap. Just to give you a reminder, you can see our emojis there. We have our entire team here in the C&I office, as well as some of our friends in the Special Services Department helping us out this month with our efforts. We have my bit emoji here with the sunglasses, Antonio here playing some video games. All the way on the right, we have Kristen and Kelly. And then on the top and bottom, we have Rosemary and Carly from our special programs team. Following my session, they will be helping out the next couple weeks. And we will bring you a total of 6 sessions, of which you can get 1 hour each of Act 48 hours, as long as you hand in the exit ticket and answer a few items. Thank you again for participating in this month. We really see a lot of value in this topic, and we hope that you can gain some insight as well. So I'm actually going to start off with it's about a 4 to 5 minute video. I think it does a really nice job of capturing where we are right now as we transition into the second half, or a little bit beyond the second half of our school year. So just bear with me.
The majority of American public students are now well into a virtual school year, and data from around the country is starting to show that middle and high school students are falling behind. This week, Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, one of the biggest districts in the country, reported an 83% jump in middle and high schoolers earning Fs this year compared to last year. In the independent school district in Houston, more than 40% of middle and high school students are failing at least 2 of their classes. And in St. Paul, Minnesota, the superintendent reports nearly 40% of public high school students have failing marks, double the normal number. Joining us now to discuss that, the superintendent of St. Paul Public Schools, Joe Gothard, and Dr. Hannah Schachter, psychology professor at Wayne State University and an expert on adolescent development. Thank you both for being here. This is such an important topic for so many. Joe, start us off if you can. What's been the biggest surprise for you when it comes to the challenges of virtual learning?
I think most of the challenges have been, we are a district of 36,000 students. All of them have an iPad at home. They're able to connect, and we have great support and technology for those who struggle to, or who can't quite get onto the internet. But I think our greatest challenge is just students accessing learning. And, we can do everything digitally as possible, and making sure that assignments are uploaded into our learning management system. But we have many school-dependent learners, and that means that students who need a little bit extra support, students who need to raise a hand and have someone there to attend to them, and students who are losing motivation on having that structure and that system to support their learning.
And Joe, how do you do that? Because in a normal school year, students will inevitably differ in the level of support they get from their parents and other resources. But at least while they're in the school building, they're presumably getting the same education. So what do you do now that they're home the majority of American public students?
And students who are losing motivation on having that structure and that system to support their learning.
And Joe, how do you do that? Because in a normal school year, students will inevitably differ in the level of support they get from their parents and other resources. But at least while they're in the school building, they're presumably getting the same education. So what do you do now that they're home the whole time?
So I think some of the things we learned from spring, now we've been on distance learning for quite some time. So I think our teachers, our staff have become far more adept at developing rooms and support centers that students can come to in a virtual setting to get some of their support. Far better at using the technology to have breakout groups or small group learning. And I think those are some of the advancements, but there's still nothing that can take place for that physical in-person interaction that our students are really yearning for right now.
And Hannah, let's talk about that, the academic disengagement. And given the stress that kids are under right now, even the CDC reporting the rise in suicidal thoughts since the pandemic hit. What can we do about this right now? And how can we try and get ahead of it before it gets even worse?
I think we have to remember that students' mental health and their academic outcomes and their academic engagement are so intricately intertwined. So when students are feeling emotionally distressed, when they're feeling disconnected from their peers, from their teachers, that can take a toll on their ability to stay engaged and feel motivated to learn. So I think one thing we can really be thinking about is how do we prioritize students' emotional needs and finding ways such as breakout rooms and creating peer-to-peer interactions in this virtual environment that can really emphasize opportunities not only to learn together, but also to fulfill those needs for emotional and social connection.
Joe, given everything you've learned to this point, and we all continue to learn as we go here, what's your message to struggling students and their parents?
Well, one, we're not going to give up on any of our students. We just can't do that. And our staff and our schools and our community need our support. So my direction back to our schools was to identify our students who are struggling based on those marks that we received. And let's really think creatively right now on ways that we can differ in the way that we're providing support. And sadly, we have to be in a virtual setting right now, but that isn't going to stop our efforts. And we are going to continue to hope that we can transition into a hybrid or blended learning throughout the school year. But we are not going to give up on our students. We believe in them, and we need to help them believe in themselves and get through this school year, this really difficult time in fighting this pandemic.
And Hannah, we've been talking about this afternoon, that students don't just learn the academics at school. This is also the place where they grow socially and emotionally. So how can schools, parents, us, help support kids and teens on the front right now?
I think one thing is even just validating the stress and the concerns that students are having, making them know that it's okay if they're feeling overwhelmed and if this is feeling stressful, and that we're all in the same boat. I think also providing these opportunities for sort of informal social support, checking in, both teachers and parents, giving students, adolescents and children alike the opportunity to voice what are they struggling with right now? What can adults do that might make them feel better? And creating those environments, even in the online learning communities, that it's not just about getting through your bio topics or your history lesson, but it's also about having that time to talk with one another, peer-to-peer, teacher to student, and share strategies for coping during these stressful circumstances.
All right, Superintendent Joe Gothard, Dr. Hannah Schechter, thank you so much for being.
So some really powerful, a really powerful video, I think, in the perspective of a school psychologist and also a superintendent. But what you hear there, and some really, really important takeaways. So we kind of know, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, but where our struggles are now and where we need to go. But you hear from both perspectives the prioritization of student well-being, social emotional learning, and making sure that we're capturing strategies to make sure that our students are okay. So if there's one piece that I really want to come out of this session, it's making sure that we make this month's theme, this concept of SEL, a priority, no matter where we are in our transition process or where we are in our school year, because I think the reality is that we've all gone through quite a bit on what is now basically a year-long pandemic. And I think the more that we can put an emphasis on this aspect, this SEL aspect, it's really going to pay dividends for us down the road. And I have a great graphic toward the end of the presentation as we start to try to refocus on some of the academic achievement. So I want to make sure I shared that video. I think it sort of captured the essence of this session really well. A couple things that we'll talk about today. We'll do a very brief review of the key components of social emotional learning as defined by Castle. One of the big pieces, the big themes of these brief slides really is to emphasize the importance of data in this process. Hopefully you're able to sort of refocus by the end of this session and kind of think about, what does this look like for the rest of 2021? We have 3 months left of school. And then, of course, as we regroup and move into 21-22, how does that evolve from what has occurred over the past year plus of what school looks like? And the rest of this month, we're really going to try to give you specific strategies on some things that you could do within your classroom. Whereas the first session and this session are sort of big overview ideas of how some of these key concepts look. And then we'll finish off just by taking a look at a couple case studies, school-wide case studies that districts have really captured some unique ways or some inspirational ways to make SEL a priority. So once again, and I was just talking within my department last week about this, if there's one takeaway as I sort of lead this effort in March within our department, that I hope participants gather if they have progressed with us through the 6 sessions, it's really this wheel, right? The framework for social and emotional learning as defined by Castle, and the components. So you can see there the self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social skill or relationship skills, and responsible decision making, and then how the classroom, school, and community work together to create this dynamic, hopefully for everyone involved within the organization, which is really, really a critical concept. So just a quick reminder there of what the key components are when we talk about SEL. And I think a great place to start as an educator, counselor, school leader, whoever may be viewing this video, is with the self-reflection document. So what Castle has done is created this, and I think it's great, whether you're a teacher or anyone else working within the school framework here. And what it allows you to do is just have a quick checklist here of some key ideas, right? Some key ideas of which you can assess, this has been a strength of mine, and this is an area in which I can grow. I personally would benefit from this, I know, and I know all of us from time to time really can take a look at this and say, hey, am I keeping this as a priority, especially during difficult times? We all know that even following pandemic, that we're going to encounter difficult times within our school systems. So are we keeping this as a priority? Do we value social and emotional learning? And if not, where do I need to grow? So I wanted to make sure that I shared this tool so that you really had this to refer to in the future. It's a quick sort of inventory at time to time. I often get questions from school districts, school leaders, counselors about, are there SEL programs out there? Are there curriculum components that we can implement? And I do provide resources, but I also think one of the key ideas is that we're trying to implement these practices into our daily lessons and into what we do on a daily basis. And if we're doing that, and that becomes contagious, and it's happening throughout the school environment, I think there's less of an emphasis on trying to find a program maybe that is the Band-Aid for what we're trying to do. It's really a cultural piece. It's got to be a point of emphasis, and it's got to be a shared vision. So anytime we sort of look, and these are just 2 examples, I'm not asking you to really utilize these in any way, but I wanted to show them as a lead-in. But on one side of the screen, you see the National School Climate Center's stages of improvement planning. And then on one side, you see the cycle of improvement, which has been communicated out via our Department of Education. And I'm not asking to compare, I'm just asking to simply bear with me as I recognize some of the similarities. And oftentimes there's a preparation piece. In our case, as school entities, the preparation piece, of course, is the fact that we are in this position, and we do need to look at what types of needs have changed, and how do we react as classrooms, schools, and districts, right? And then there's an evaluation piece or an assessment piece where we're taking a look at the information that we have, which I'm going to get into more detail in a second. And we try to utilize that data, key word here, or information to create an action plan and then adjust course, et cetera. So just 2 examples here. where we see the similarities of making sure that we have this critical component of being able to evaluate and or assess, whichever action word verbiage you want to use. But the key component here is that we have that step. So, and if anybody wants to give me a little credit on my emoji, I'm trying to step up my game here with that. But discovery of data points, right? So this is really where I want to make sure that I drive this key point home, right? If the overlying theme of the SEL framework is one of my hopes, one of the big hopes of this set of slides is really to drive home the importance of taking a pause, and I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a framework for that, and to reflect in the data. So as we conduct conversations with school leaders and organizations, we are clearly discovering some key pieces here and some similarities across our CLIU footprint, and even within the greater region and across the state. So I'm imploring you to spend time in your own data. These are some examples, right? Attendance and engagement kind of work hand in hand, as we know. What types of themes are coming about from those two ideas, right? Are we getting students to attend as our baseline? And when they are there, are they engaging, and why not? And we'll talk, like I said, and if you look back at the last session and you follow along with the next group of sessions, you're going to really gather some great ideas about how we increase the A and the E here, right? The attendance and the engagement. And how can we incorporate SEL right into our lessons so that those two pieces are in fact addressed? We can take a look at achievement data. We can look at if we have the ability to access surveys or student and or parent responses. Maybe we can look at SEL data, discipline data if it exists. And then of course we can utilize our own communications with families, whether electronic, in person, or over the phone, probably not in person at this point, but the conversations that we've had to be able to drive some of our future planning. So as we think about those data points, you can see here in green is one of Castle's big ideas as we refocus our efforts to make sure that we have this partnership with our stakeholders to take a look at the key data pieces. And before any kind of discussion takes place with our key stakeholders, if we're able to create a team or a committee, we want to be able to prepare the data. So we want to be able to take a look at it, analyze it, break it down, group it together so that it has the talking power that we need it to, so that it has the ability to speak to us, so that we can filter it out and extract the key points. We want to be able to prepare questions based on the data. So how else can we dig into this? What is this going to help us do? Remember, the equity piece is so important here. Are we able to look at it in a way that it is serving all of our students at the right moment in time, right? The definition of equity, this idea that we're able to provide to our students exactly what they need in the right moment in time, despite race, gender, etc. So these are really key considerations when we start to think about data and how we're going to use it. So once we get to the point that we have our data set, we were able to sort of vet it out. We've had the equity consideration, so we've sort of filtered it. Okay, now what? And one of the key pieces, and again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth in some of our future sessions here in March, but one of the challenges is how do we empower the student and parent voice? So if we're only working off of sort of our closed circle of opinions, there's a very good chance that we're not getting a true sense of the picture. And I do a lot of school climate work here at CLIU. And one of the pieces that I love about the school climate initiative is that it really puts a lot of value on bringing in parents and even incorporating students into that committee and into that feedback piece. So I implore you to do that. I think that's a great idea. And then there's some key questions here on what we can do with that data. So we can describe it, right? We can try to look at what are we missing? Is there something else that we still need? What what are these numbers? What is this information saying to me? And what are the implications moving forward? And what are my next steps going to be? If we sort of think back to some of those initial slides that I had shown with the 2 improvement cycles, this is really school improvement, classroom improvement planning at its best, right? This idea of looking at data, what does it say to me, and how can I plan for the future? I remember when I was a principal for several years, there was always one of the subdomains spoke about assessment. And one of the key considerations oftentimes that educators would forget would be, what am I going to do with the assessment data, right? Oftentimes we get sort of stuck in a cycle where we're giving an assessment, we teach, we give an assessment, we teach, we give an assessment, et cetera. And there's a lot more in between. I'm not trying to oversimplify the process, but what I'm suggesting is we need to find time to spend in a data analysis and looking at what has occurred so that we can drive our future. So here we are now talking about it in a different light. We're not talking about necessarily achievement. We're talking about it in the social, emotional health aspect. So really, really important. Really briefly, because I don't want to steal the thunder from some of the upcoming presentations that we have, but just some tools to consider when we do gather that data. Once again, I'm not going to get into this because this is really going to be the focus of some of our sessions coming up, but just a few ideas. And my idea that I just want to emphasize is this idea that it's okay to play. And I heard that very early on. I think it was early summer of 20, when some of these things were pretty fresh. Some of the impact was very fresh. And the okay to play really comes into this idea that we need to make sure that we're taking time to stop and develop and strengthen the connections that we have with our students. Just one man's opinion. The educators that I have talked to who were able to capture this idea of making sure that SEL is at the forefront and they were taking time to take a step out of, let's say, academic learning and build connections, have found greater success than those that thought that they could simply just keep paving forward in the way that they always have, right? Here's my material. We're going to have a lesson today virtually and move on. They're really starting to get, in many instances, frustrated and finding themselves trying to find ways to readjust. So again, watch our future sessions. A lot of great content coming up in this area. The second big idea when we talk about refocus here is this idea of refocusing on adult connection, self-care, et cetera. And we're going to have an entire session on this, I believe, to conclude the month with Carly and Rosemary. So once again, I'm not going to drive too far into this, but rather just introduce it as a big idea. And I really love the quote that taking care of yourself is not selfish. There are several others out there, as you know. Personally, I believe, and research speaks to the fact that you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself, right? So here's a good old classic Nintendo Entertainment System that you may remember, some of you, back in the early 19 to mid 1980s, not to date myself, but personally for me, a decent video game is an easy way to get lost. I enjoy exercise and some other things as well, but simple things like a video game for me from time to time really allows me to escape some of the mental rigor of the day and just sort of get lost in for me, what is just, a mindless game where I can sort of just enjoy it, but not think about it too heavily. So just a simple example that I want to make sure I throw out there. And again, stay tuned because we're going to dive into this in much more detail. What I've included here is this problem of practice protocol. And I'll open it briefly, but I don't want to get too far lost in it. But I do want to make sure that I keep it here so that you have it as a tool. And really what this problem of practice protocol is a way for educators, or school systems, I should say, if there's a continuous theme or continuous problem that's occurring within the system, it gives you a protocol to work through that problem. So I'll take the dilemma at the top here, which is the longer we are teaching remotely, fewer of my students sign on for our virtual class meetings. this affects morale and also causes students to miss info about homework help and other support. So you can see here what it does is it allows you to take the dilemma, frame the question, and then implement background information. Then from there, it gives you a way to facilitate the discussion. So maybe this is in a grade level meeting, this could be in a department meeting, it could be building wide, it could be with other stakeholders, but really it gives you a structured approach to be able to sound out some of the common problems that you're experiencing. And I know in working with schools in the school improvement process, school climate, as well as some other initiatives, that this approach can really be impactful because it gives you a structured environment. It gives you a structured way to look at some of the common themes that you are seeing. So I wanted to make sure I included this. You can probably spend an entire PD on how this looks and how this works and even implement it. But I did want to make sure that I did include it in this presentation. So just some more tools to consider when we talk about making sure that we keep the care of ourselves and our colleagues in mind, that I included here. I did include here at the CLIU, we have an entire trauma informed series where we can help in those areas. The Castle SEL inventory and analysis really allows you to take a look at some of the initiatives that your school is utilizing, potentially even gathering some more ideas, or taking a look at how to make changes within the bigger system, if that's something that you want to help to lead. There is a learning plan that I've included as well, so that you can create your own learning plan if you do want to try to embed yourself in some of these areas that I've discussed over the first session and now the second session. So I really wanted to try to equip you with some tools that you can utilize when we talk about making sure that you continue to take care of yourself and others, right? Just to continue to fill your toolbox with ideas, and you will have the slides as part of this presentation. I don't expect you to absorb all of this or memorize any of it whatsoever, really just to make sure I include these so you can kind of think, hey, I remember that time that guy from the IU talked about how I can create my own learning plan if I want to make this more of an emphasis. Or I remember that time he shared that inventory piece at the beginning where I can kind of review the things I'm doing, how they look, and where I want to change. So tools throughout that you can utilize and hopefully make an impact when we talk about SEL. The last key piece when we talk about the refocus concept here is this maintaining safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments. And I have the 3 signature practices linked. I'm not going to get into that too much. I will briefly open it, but as you can see here, Castle really drives home the 3 key practices. So if you look right here in the middle of the page, you'll see welcoming and inclusive activities, engaging strategies, brain breaks and transitions, and optimistic closures. And when I spoke in the beginning about solutions to some of the school inquiries about resources and curriculum, this is really what I was talking about, is this idea of being able to implement key strategies into the lessons, no matter where you are in the school year or at what age level you're working with. Because I think if we can make this something that we implement on a regular basis throughout the school year at key times, we can really make an impact, and we can really change the climate and culture of our classrooms, hopefully becoming contagious so others want to do that as well. So depending where you are in your career path here, or what position you hold, this may sound or look a little bit different. However, I think this idea of implementing these ideas throughout our practice is really the way to go. I have those signature practices linked, but I want to ensure you once again that they are going to be a really key piece of some of the upcoming sessions. I know Kristen and Kelly are looking to implement those into their presentations. just take a look at this chart here that I took from the Castle website. You can see here some SEL approaches that may be implemented in green, right? Explicit skill instruction, teacher instructional practices, integration, organizational culture and climate strategies. What happens in the short term? We acquire the key skills in the 5 competency areas. We improve our attitude about self, others, learning in schools. We enhance learning. And then as a result of that, in the final column in orange, what are our big our big outcomes, our big accomplishments, if you will? We see better social behavior. Conduct becomes a more positive situation, less distress, and of course, this thing that we sort of all want to see collectively, which is improved academic performance. So as I sort of wind down in this session, I really love this illustration because I think, we sort of think, well, Mike, I get that this has been a tough year. I get that we need to kind of work on this together, but why does this SEL piece keep popping up in the educational community? And why is this so critical? I think this graphic does a really nice job of saying, look, if we do these items in green, we get these short-term outcomes in blue, and then these big ideas in orange can be accomplished. And all of these ideas are research-based. We know that this does work, but it does take some organizational prioritization, and it takes some hard work on behalf of educators. So we hope to give you the ideas in the first 2 sessions, the tools in the next 4 sessions that hopefully you can start to make a difference on a daily basis. So these are some examples. I'll hit on maybe 1 or 2 of them, but I did put these into the presentation so you can kind of take a look at some really large scale school districts and some ideas of what they have done. But I'll highlight Austin Independent School District. So one of the things that you've seen across some of the districts who've been successful is they really made this SEL piece at the front and center of what their accomplishments were going to be over the next year. Really made it part of their their comprehensive planning process. They made it part of what they were going to prioritize to make sure that this was going to be at the front and center of what they accomplished. So this is once again, Austin. You can see that they created this hashtag in this together. This SEL at Home website. This is a Google site that they've created, and what they included here are activities, educator resources, family resources, mindfulness practices, etc. And what you start to see in some of these other initiatives, included Baltimore and I believe El Paso, are school-wide slogans, logos, real strong connections and tie-ins to their mission and vision, right? It's a community-wide shared idea that everyone sort of knows that this is going to be one of our big pieces of emphasis here as we move into the pandemic, through it, and then onto the other side. We're going to continue to value this and put this at the front and center of what we do to make sure everyone's okay. So I hope that in the last 25-ish minutes, 30 minutes, that you were able to benefit from some of the key ideas that I did include. You can see here, I put the Castle Refocus on the roadmap link in case you want to take a look at it in full detail. Our PD Ready site is available. The March PD exit ticket isn't available just yet, but it will be very shortly. And of course, our YouTube page where we continue to house our PD asynchronous offerings. In January, we had differentiation, February literacy, March SEL, and in April, we're going to talk a lot about scaffolding. So I hope that you continue to join us. I hope that the first 2 sessions were very beneficial for you. And I wish you the best as you progress through this year. And I hope that you're able to stay safe and enjoy some of the spring weather coming up. Thank you.